Christmas Eve, a time for warmth, family, and festive joy. For me, it was supposed to be a quiet evening. I had just finished shopping for the last-minute presents and was heading home, the chill of December biting at my face as I walked briskly down the dimly lit street. My name is Alex, not my real name, and this is the story of how the most wonderful time of the year turned into the most horrifying night of my life. It started innocently enough. My day had been filled with typical holiday hustle, dodging crowds at the mall, sipping overpriced gingerbread lattes, and mentally preparing myself for the obligatory family dinner the next day. By 8 p.m., I was on my way back to my apartment, my arms weighed down with shopping bags and my mind preoccupied with gift wrapping and Christmas playlists. The streets were quieter than usual, a strange contrast to the chaos of the mall. Strings of lights twinkled in apartment windows, and the distant hum of a Christmas carol floated through the air. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. I chalked it up to everyone being indoors, enjoying their holiday preparations. But in hindsight, I should have noticed how unnaturally deserted the street felt. As I turned the corner into the narrow alley I often used as a shortcut, I saw a man standing at the far end. He was dressed in a Santa suit, complete with a fake white beard. At first, I thought it was someone spreading holiday cheer, maybe a charity worker or just a jolly neighbor. He stood motionless, staring at me, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. "Merry Christmas," I called out, trying to keep the mood light. He didn't respond. Unease prickled at the back of my neck. I tightened my grip on my shopping bags and quickened my pace, intending to pass him without making further eye contact. But as I approached, he stepped into my path, blocking my way. "Nice night, isn't it?" he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a polite smile. "Just trying to get home." He tilted his head, studying me like a predator sizing up its prey. "What's the rush? It's Christmas Eve. You should stop and enjoy it." "I'd love to, but I've got to wrap these presents," I said, gesturing to my bags. "Presents." His eyes flicked to the bags, and something about his expression sent a shiver down my spine. "Must be nice, having people to give presents to." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "Yeah, well, I should get going. Merry Christmas." As I tried to step around him, he grabbed my arm. His grip was strong, too strong for someone just trying to spread holiday cheer. "You're not in a hurry, are you?" he asked, his tone now menacing. Panic surged through me. "Let go," I said firmly, yanking my arm away. He didn't resist, but the sinister smile on his face told me this wasn't over. I hurried past him, my heart pounding, and didn't look back until I was halfway down the alley. When I finally turned around, he was gone. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The moment I stepped out of the alley and onto the main street, I felt it again, the sensation of being watched. I glanced over my shoulder, and there he was, trailing me at a distance. His red suit made him stand out against the dark street, but he moved with an unsettling calmness, as if he had all the time in the world. I tried to stay composed, convincing myself that I was overreacting. Maybe he lived nearby and just happened to be walking in the same direction. But when I crossed the street, so did he. When I took an unexpected turn, he followed. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This man was stalking me. I picked up my pace, clutching my phone in one hand and my shopping bags in the other. My apartment was only a few blocks away. If I could just make it home, I'd be safe. But he was faster than I anticipated. As I reached the entrance to my building and fumbled with my keys, I heard his footsteps quicken behind me. I turned around just in time to see him lunging toward me. I screamed and swung one of my shopping bags at him, hitting him square in the face. It bought me enough time to unlock the door and slam it shut behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock the door. I leaned against it, gasping for breath, as he pounded on the other side. "Open up," he growled. "We're not done yet." I backed away, my mind racing. I needed to call the police. My phone was still in my hand, but in my panic, I dropped it. The screen cracked as it hit the floor. Swearing under my breath, I picked it up and dialed 911. 911, "What's your emergency?" The operator answered. "There's a man trying to break into my apartment," I stammered. "He's dressed as Santa Claus. Please, you have to send someone." The operator assured me that help was on the way and instructed me to stay on the line. Meanwhile, the pounding on the door had stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear any sign of him outside. Then I heard it, the sound of glass shattering. My stomach dropped. He was trying to get in through the window. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife I could find. My apartment wasn't big, and there weren't many places to hide. If he got in, I'd have to face him head-on. The minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police. Every creak and groan of the building made me jump. Then, I heard sirens in the distance. Relief flooded through me. They were close. A loud crash came from the living room. I spun around to see him climbing through the broken window, shards of glass crunching under his boots. He looked even more terrifying up close, his beard askew and his eyes wild with rage. "Get out!" I screamed, brandishing the knife. He laughed, a chilling sound that sent a wave of fear through me. "You've got spirit. I like that." Before he could take another step, the sound of pounding on the door echoed through the apartment. "Police! Open up!" The man hesitated, his eyes darting between me and the door. He made a split-second decision and lunged at me, but I was ready. I slashed at him with the knife, catching his arm. He screamed in pain, but it didn't stop him. He grabbed me, his strength overwhelming, and wrestled the knife out of my hand. Just as I thought it was over, the front door burst open, and 2 officers stormed in, their guns drawn. "Drop the weapon!" one of them shouted. The man froze, the knife still in his hand. For a moment, I thought he might try to fight them, but then he dropped the knife and raised his hands. The officers tackled him to the ground and cuffed him, their movements swift and practiced. I sank to the floor, trembling with relief as one of the officers approached me. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you." I thought he was going to kill me. The man was dragged out of my apartment, still dressed in his blood-stained Santa suit. As he passed me, he sneered. "Merry Christmas," he said, his voice dripping with malice. The officers stayed with me until the paramedics arrived to check me over. They told me the man had been terrorizing the neighborhood for weeks, using his Santa disguise to lull people into a false sense of security. Thanks to my call, they were finally able to catch him. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. But I was alive and he was in custody. Christmas Day came and went, a blur of exhaustion and relief. It wasn't the holiday I'd planned, but I was grateful to be surrounded by my family, safe and sound. So, if you're reading this, remember, not all Christmas stories are filled with joy and laughter. Sometimes, the true gift is simply surviving the night. Christmas Eve, a night filled with anticipation, warmth, and celebration. For me, it was supposed to be just another shift at work. I deliver pizzas, and Christmas is one of the busiest nights of the year. My name is Jordan, not my real name. And this is the story of how an ordinary delivery turned into a nightmare I'll never forget. It started with a late-night order from a house on the outskirts of town. The address was unfamiliar, tucked away in an area I rarely delivered to. I had just loaded the pizza into the car when my boss, trying to lighten the mood, joked, "Maybe it's Santa placing the order. Bring him some milk and cookies too." We laughed, but something about the address left me uneasy. The drive was quiet, the streets lined with glowing decorations and the occasional group of carolers. As I drove farther from the main town, the festive lights gave way to darkness. The house was at the end of a long, winding road, surrounded by tall trees that loomed like shadows in the moonlight. When I pulled into the driveway, the house appeared ordinary enough, a modest 2-story with dim lights glowing from a few windows. I grabbed the pizza and walked up to the door, feeling the chill of the night seep through my jacket. The porch light flickered as I rang the doorbell. No one answered. I waited, shifting from foot to foot to stay warm, and rang again. Still nothing. I knocked on the door, louder this time, and called out, "Pizza delivery!" A moment later, the door creaked open. A man stood there, partially hidden in the shadows. He was tall and thin, with unkempt hair and a hollow look in his eyes. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're fast," he said, his voice low and gravelly. Thanks. That'll be $23.50, I said, holding up the pizza. He didn't move to take it. Instead, he stepped back and gestured for me to come inside. "I'll grab the cash from the kitchen. Come in. It's cold out there." Every instinct screamed at me not to go inside, but the biting wind and the awkwardness of standing on the porch made me hesitate. "I'm fine here," I replied, trying to keep my tone polite. "You can bring the money out." His smile faltered, and his eyes narrowed. "Don't be rude. Come in." Before I could respond, a loud crash came from somewhere inside the house. I jumped, clutching the pizza box tighter. "Everything okay?" I asked, peering past him into the dimly lit hallway. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Just the cat knocking something over. Come in while I get the money." This time, his tone wasn't a suggestion. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with an ominous thud. The air in the house was stale, and the faint smell of something metallic lingered. "Wait here," he said, disappearing down the hallway. I stood awkwardly in the entryway, my eyes darting around the room. The walls were bare, and the furniture looked old and mismatched. A single lamp illuminated the space, casting long, eerie shadows. Something about the place felt off, like it hadn't been lived in for a long time. Minutes passed, and the man didn't return. I called out, "Sir, are you coming back?" No response. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint creak of floorboards overhead. That's when I noticed the door to the basement, slightly ajar. A faint light flickered from below, and I thought I heard the sound of movement. Curiosity mixed with dread as I took a cautious step toward it. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut, and I heard the distinct sound of a lock clicking into place. Panic set in as I realized I was trapped. I dropped the pizza and bolted to the front door, but it wouldn't budge. The man had locked it from the outside. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty house. From somewhere upstairs, I heard the man's voice. "You shouldn't have come in. Now you'll have to stay." My heart pounded as I searched for another way out. The windows were boarded up, and the back door was secured with heavy chains. Desperation took over as I grabbed a chair and smashed it against the nearest window. The glass cracked but didn't shatter completely. Footsteps thudded on the stairs, growing louder with each passing second. I grabbed a shard of broken glass and turned to face the man as he emerged from the shadows, holding a long, rusted crowbar. "You shouldn't have come inside," he repeated, his tone now cold and menacing. "Stay back," I shouted, brandishing the glass like a weapon. "I'll hurt you if I have to." He laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You think you can fight me? You're just another delivery boy. No one will miss you." His words fueled my determination. As he lunged at me, I dodged and slashed at his arm with the glass, drawing blood. He roared in pain but didn't stop. I managed to push past him and ran toward the kitchen, hoping to find something more substantial to defend myself with. In the kitchen, I grabbed a heavy frying pan and swung it as he came after me. The impact sent him staggering back, but he quickly regained his footing. "You're going to regret that," he snarled, raising the crowbar. Before he could strike, the sound of sirens filled the air. Relief flooded through me as red and blue lights flashed through the cracks in the boarded windows. The man froze, his expression twisting into one of panic. "No," he muttered, backing away. "No, they can't be here." A voice boomed from outside. "Police! Come out with your hands up." The man turned to run, but I wasn't about to let him get away. Summoning every ounce of courage, I swung the frying pan again, this time hitting him square in the back of the head. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Moments later, the front door was forced open and officers stormed in. They found me standing over the man, shaking and holding the frying pan. One of them gently guided me away while others secured the man in handcuffs. As they let him out, one of the officers turned to me. "You're lucky you called for backup when you did. We've been looking for this guy. He's been luring people here for weeks." I blinked, confused. "I didn't call you," I said. The officer frowned. "A neighbor reported suspicious activity. Looks like they saved your life." I nodded, too shaken to process everything. They stayed with me while I gave my statement, assuring me that the man would be facing justice. As I drove back to the pizza shop, my hands still trembling, I couldn't help but think about how close I'd come to becoming just another victim. So, if you're reading this, take my advice. Trust your instincts. No job, no matter how routine, is worth ignoring the warning signs. And if something feels off, get out while you still can. Christmas Eve may be a time for miracles, but for me, it was the night I learned that sometimes survival is the greatest gift of all. Christmas Eve. The roads were slick with fresh snow, and the air was filled with that peculiar stillness that only winter nights bring. I was running late. A quick stop to grab a last-minute gift for my nephew had turned into an ordeal when the cashier struggled with the payment system. By the time I got back to my car, the streets were nearly empty. The GPS said it would take me another 20 minutes to get home, but I knew a shortcut through a winding rural road. I'd taken it once before during the day, and while it wasn't well lit, it would save me time. The idea of getting home to warm cider and holiday movies was enough to convince me to take it again. The snow fell heavier as I turned onto the narrow road. Tall pine trees lined either side, their branches heavy with white. My headlights barely pierced the darkness, and the car's heater hummed softly, fighting off the chill. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, navigating carefully around sharp bends. That's when I saw it. A car parked on the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking faintly. As I got closer, I noticed a figure standing next to it, waving their arms. A man in a heavy coat, his face obscured by the hood, stepped into the beam of my headlights. He gestured for me to stop. I slowed down, rolling down the window slightly. "Everything okay?" I asked. "My car won't start," he replied, his voice muffled by the scarf wrapped around his face. "Could you give me a lift to the nearest gas station?" I hesitated. The nearest station was a good 10 miles back, and the thought of driving that far in this weather wasn't appealing. But it was Christmas Eve, and leaving someone stranded didn't feel right. "All right," I said. "Hop in." He climbed into the passenger seat, shaking snow off his coat. "Thank you. Not many people would stop on a night like this." "No problem," I replied, forcing a smile. "Where are you headed?" "Just the gas station," he said quickly, avoiding eye contact. The air in the car felt heavier with him inside. I glanced over occasionally, noting how he kept his hands buried in his pockets and his gaze fixed straight ahead. Something about him made me uneasy, but I tried to shake it off. It's Christmas, I told myself. He's probably just cold and stressed. We drove in silence for a few miles until he finally spoke. "Not many people use this road at night. You're brave." I laughed nervously, just trying to save time. "Besides, I've taken it before." "Really?" he said, turning to look at me for the first time. His eyes were sharp, unsettlingly so. "You're lucky then. Not everyone makes it through this road." A chill that had nothing to do with the weather crept up my spine. I tried to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, leaning back in his seat. "People go missing. Cars found abandoned. No one knows why." I forced a laugh, hoping to lighten the mood. "Sounds like an urban legend." He didn't respond, and the silence stretched uncomfortably. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I kept my eyes on the road, counting the minutes until we reached the gas station. Then, out of nowhere, he spoke again. "You've been kind. It's rare these days." "Well, it's Christmas," I said, glancing at him. People should help each other. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not everyone thinks that way. Before I could respond, the engine sputtered, and the car lurched forward. I cursed under my breath, pulling to the side of the road. "Not now," I muttered, trying to restart the engine. "What's wrong?" he asked, his tone oddly calm. "I don't know," I replied, frustration creeping into my voice. "Probably the cold." I tried the ignition again, but the car refused to start. The headlights dimmed, and the heater cut off, leaving us in near total darkness. "Looks like we're stuck," he said, his voice carrying an edge I hadn't noticed before. "I have a flashlight in the trunk," I said, reaching for the door handle. "Maybe I can figure out what's wrong." As I stepped out, the cold hit me like a wall. I grabbed the flashlight and popped the hood, the beam of light cutting through the falling snow. The engine looked fine, but I wasn't exactly a mechanic. I closed the hood and turned to get back inside, only to find the passenger door open and the man gone. "Hello," I called out, my breath forming clouds in the freezing air. The only response was the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Panic set in as I scanned the area, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The snow around the car was untouched except for the tracks leading to the passenger side. Where could he have gone? Suddenly, I heard a crunch behind me. I spun around, the flashlight beam landing on the man standing just a few feet away. He was holding something shiny in his hand, a knife. "You shouldn't have stopped," he said, his voice devoid of the earlier warmth. I backed away, my heart racing. "Listen, I don't want any trouble. Just take whatever you want." He tilted his head, almost amused. "It's not about what I want. It's about what you shouldn't have done." Without warning, he lunged at me. I barely dodged, slipping on the icy ground as I scrambled to get away. The flashlight flew out of my hand, plunging the world into darkness. I ran blindly, the sound of his footsteps close behind. My breath came in ragged gasps, each one visible in the freezing air. My only thought was to get away, to survive. Ahead, I saw the faint glow of headlights. Car was approaching. I stumbled onto the road, waving my arms frantically. The vehicle skidded to a stop, and a man jumped out, shouting, "What's going on? Help! He's trying to kill me!" I cried, pointing behind me. The man turned just as my attacker emerged from the shadows, knife raised. The driver reacted quickly, pulling a tire iron from his trunk and brandishing it. "Back off!" he shouted. For a moment, it seemed like the attacker might comply. But then he lunged again, and the driver swung the tire iron, knocking the knife from his hand. Together, we managed to subdue him until the police arrived, summoned by the driver's quick call. When the officers cuffed him and led him away, they found a collection of stolen wallets, IDs, and a disturbing notebook detailing his plans. He'd been preying on travelers for months, using the desolate road as his hunting ground. As I sat in the back of the police car, wrapped in a blanket, I couldn't help but think about how close I'd come to becoming another entry in his twisted journal. This Christmas Eve, I learned that not all gifts are wrapped in shiny paper. Sometimes, they come in the form of a stranger's intervention and a second chance at life. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the content. As a college student, I work hard to create these videos, and I edit everything on my mobile phone. I'm hoping to upgrade to a laptop to improve the quality of my videos, but I don't want to ask for money directly. This Christmas, if you enjoy what I do, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could consider subscribing to the channel. It would mean the world to me. Your support helps me so much as I continue working toward my goals. Wishing you all a very Merry Christmas. May this festive season bring you joy and warmth. Thanks again for your support, and stay tuned for more.